Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today. We're looking at the ripple effects, the potential ripple effects of the recent Gaza ceasefire. It was signed, right as President Trump, right as he took office.
Sure.
So this deal, it really has the potential to reshape the whole Middle East, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. We're going to be unpacking an in-depth analysis. It's from the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. And they've done some great work, really exploring all the angles of this. So by the end of this deep dive, you'll know what happened, but you'll also know why it matters. Why it matters for the whole region, right?
Yeah, I think what's really striking about this ceasefire is the timing.
Yeah.
It happens right as this new U.S. administration, is eager to make its mark on the world stage.
It does make you wonder, doesn't it, if this could be like a really early win for Trump for his whole peace through strength kind of deal. He's certainly made it clear that he wants to be seen as a deal maker.
Oh yeah, there's definitely potential for that narrative to take hold, But whether this ceasefire, whether it's a long-term success, it really hinges on how it all plays out, right? Like on the ground, We have to look at how the deal's implemented, how it affects other players in the region, and of course what happens in Gaza and the West Bank.
That's right. And this analysis that we're looking at, it actually breaks down the ceasefire's impact into like 7 key areas. So we've got Gaza, obviously, West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Iraq, and Yemen. So we're going to cover a lot of ground here.
Yeah, it's kind of like, 7 pieces of a really complex puzzle, all interconnected, A shift in one area, it kind of triggers a reaction in the others.
Right. So let's start with Gaza.
Yeah.
That's where the fighting was the most intense. So the ceasefire has, thankfully, brought a reduction in violence, but we got to remember that Hamas is still a powerful force in the region.
Oh, absolutely. And the Washington Institute, their report, it emphasizes that, even though Hamas lost, a good chunk of their fighters, a good chunk of their weapons, they still have some cards to play. The report specifically mentions, the rockets that they have left. They estimate it's around 8,000, and they're still using those underground tunnel networks, which could be used for surprise attacks.
So this ceasefire doesn't mean Hamas is just going to disappear. So what does that mean for Israel? What does that mean for Israel's long-term strategy in Gaza?
Well, the deal, it seems like it's pushing Israel to consider some different ways of governing Gaza. Going beyond just trying to contain Hamas.
That sounds like a pretty big shift. Can you kind of break that down for us? Like what might that look like?
Well, the analysis argues that just focusing on limiting Hamas's weapons, just limiting their rearmament, that's not going to cut it. Israel's going to need to really get involved in finding a long-term solution for governing Gaza, like a real viable one, and that could involve supporting civil society, encouraging economic growth, and ultimately working towards a government that's more stable and representative.
Right. This is all easier said than done, though, right? I mean, Gaza's facing massive devastation. There's the potential for legal and diplomatic blowback on Israel for their actions. And then the whole question of balancing reconstruction with demilitarization, that's a tough one.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. And then there's the prisoner exchange, which is a key part of this ceasefire.
It's almost ironic, isn't it? Just hours after they sign this peace deal, Hamas is vowing to wage future wars. It's kind of unsettling, to say the least. Yeah, it definitely highlights that if you wanna get lasting peace, you can't just manage the symptoms. You gotta address the root causes of the conflict. Things like poverty, political disenfranchisement, the lack of economic opportunity in Gaza.
Okay, so let's shift gears now. We're going to move to the West Bank.
Yeah,
and it seems like things are heating up there. We're seeing a weaker Palestinian Authority, a rise in, what some are calling terrorism, and Israel's really ramped up their military operations in response.
And it's not just a conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. The report, it also points to violence by Jewish extremists, which just adds fuel to the fire.
Can you give us a specific example of this escalating violence in the West Bank?
Sure, sure. So right after the ceasefire, right after Israel launched Operation Iron Wall in Jenin. And this operation was all about, dismantling what Israel calls, terrorist infrastructure. So
Yeah.
it really shows their commitment to addressing these, security threats in the West Bank, like proactively.
So while Israel's agreeing to a ceasefire in Gaza, they're simultaneously like ramping up their military presence in the West Bank.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation. They're trying to de-escalate in one area while they're facing, these escalating threats in another.
Right.
And they're also dealing with a potential surge in activity from Hamas who might try to take advantage of the situation in the West Bank and maybe even, use those released prisoners to make things even more unstable there.
You mentioned released prisoners. How will they play into the West Bank equation?
That's a key concern highlighted in the report. Hamas could, potentially use these individuals, many of whom have experience in armed conflict, to bolster their operations in the West Bank. So it adds another layer of, complexity to an already volatile situation.
And the report also mentions the flow of arms and funds through Jordan.
Yeah.
How does that factor into the escalating tensions?
Well, the flow of weapons and money into the West Bank, it's a constant worry for Israel. It can fuel more violence, and it makes it harder to achieve any kind of, lasting peace. So both sides are facing a really difficult balancing act here, trying to keep things secure, but also working towards a more stable future.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How this ceasefire is impacting multiple places all at the same time. We've got de-escalation in Gaza, but then escalation in the West Bank.
Yeah.
And then there are all those other fronts, that are being impacted by this deal. The ones we haven't even talked about yet. Like Lebanon, Syria, Iran. Just shows you how interconnected everything is.
Yeah, like a chain reaction. You can't really isolate one event or one region without thinking about, the bigger consequences.
Right. So let's take Lebanon for example. What's the situation there like, post ceasefire?
Well, the report it notes that Hezbollah, who've been a major player in Lebanon, they've been kind of weakened by the conflict in Syria, but that doesn't mean that the challenges have just gone away.
So what are some of those challenges? Well, disarming Hezbollah and making sure Lebanon's stable in the long run. Those are still big hurdles. The group they still have a lot of influence in the country.
Yeah.
And the possibility of things flaring up again. It's a real concern. Right. And what about Syria? How's the ceasefire affected things there? Well, the collapse of the Assad regime, which was backed by Iran, that's a hit to Iranian influence in the region, but it also creates this power vacuum, which could be exploited by other groups, including some extremist organizations. So it's a mixed bag for Syria, right? I mean, there's a chance for positive change, but also the risk that things could get even more unstable. It's hard to say what'll happen next.
Yeah, it is. The situation in Syria, it's still so fluid, so complex. It's definitely one to keep an eye on in the coming months.
Okay. Now let's talk about Iran. I mean, they've been a key player in all this. How's the ceasefire? How's that affected their standing?
Well, Iran, they've definitely been weakened by the conflict, both in terms of their influence in the region and their economy, but now they're facing some pretty big decisions.
What kind of decisions are we talking about here?
Well, the ceasefire, if it actually holds, it could open up a chance for some diplomatic re-engagement with Iran. There might be an opportunity there to address their nuclear ambitions, maybe even revive the nuclear deal.
Well, remind me what was the nuclear deal again?
Oh, it was this agreement. It was reached back in 2015 between Iran and a bunch of world powers, including the U.S. And the goal was to limit Iran's nuclear program, and in exchange they lift some of the economic sanctions on them.
Okay, got it. So the possibility of bringing back that nuclear deal, it's on the table.
It's a possibility, but it's a long shot. There's a lot of distrust on both sides, and the political climate right now in the U.S. it makes it even harder.
The analysis also mentions the Abraham Accords. What are those, and why are they relevant here?
Oh, the Abraham Accords. Those are a bunch of normalization agreements,
right,
between Israel and several Arab countries like the UAE, Bahrain, and these agreements were brokered by the Trump administration, and they represent a pretty big change in the dynamics of the region.
I see. So how does the ceasefire tie into the Abraham Accords?
Well, the ceasefire it could potentially create momentum for expanding the Abraham Accords, like bringing more Arab countries into the mix, and that would be a huge diplomatic win for the Trump administration, and it could really reshape the whole Middle East.
Wow, it's starting to sound like this ceasefire has the potential to be a real turning point. It's early in Trump's presidency, but this could really set the tone for his entire Middle East policy.
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility. The ceasefire, along with potential progress on the nuclear deal, and expanding those Abraham Accords, it could give the administration some breathing room, to tackle some of the bigger issues in the region.
This might be a naive question, but what would it actually take to get lasting peace? The analysis it talks about ending Hamas rule in Gaza altogether. How realistic is that?
It's an ambitious goal. There's no doubt about that. The report, it suggests that a lasting peace, it would require a multi-pronged approach.
Okay. What would that look like?
Well, first and foremost, they have to get all the hostages released safely. That's non-negotiable if they want to build trust and move forward.
Right. But what about the bigger picture? How do we actually get to the root of this conflict and prevent more violence from happening?
Well, that's where it gets really, really tricky. There's no easy fix. But the report it outlines a few key steps. So it suggests encouraging the right conditions for new leadership to emerge in Gaza, leadership that's committed to peaceful coexistence, and that's willing to actually come to the table and negotiate.
Okay. But isn't that a little contradictory? I mean, the report calls for ending Hamas rule, but it also says that there isn't a viable alternative right now. So how do we bridge that gap?
It's a real challenge. The report suggests that the international community, they need to step up. They need to play a more active role in helping a credible alternative to Hamas, to emerge. And this could mean providing financial assistance, promoting good governance, and working to build a stronger civil society in Gaza.
Okay. But let's be realistic here. Is any of this actually doable? I mean, given the political landscape right now, both in Israel and the U.S. We've got a really divided Israeli government, a new U.S. president who's untested. It just seems like a long shot.
It's a tough environment. There's no doubt about that. But this ceasefire, even though it's fragile, it could be the thing that sparks some unexpected change. It's a chance to really shift things, to move beyond the way things have always been done. A lot depends on leadership, on people being willing to take risks. and to seize opportunities when they come up.
So let's say, just hypothetically, let's say that this ceasefire does lead to a broader peace process. What would it take for it to actually work? What kind of concessions would both sides would they need to be willing to make?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The analysis. It doesn't shy away from this tough issue. For Israel, it might mean rethinking their whole approach to settlements in the West Bank. Maybe even thinking about territorial concessions, stuff that's been off the table in the past.
And what about the Palestinians? What would they need to bring to the table?
Well, they'd need to show that they're truly committed to peaceful coexistence, to being willing to recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. It would also require a unified Palestinian leadership, one that's actually capable of negotiating and sticking to agreements, which given the divisions between Fatah and Hamas, that's a big challenge in itself.
So it sounds like any kind of lasting peace, it would require both sides to really change how they think. A willingness to move past all those narratives from the past.
Yeah. Absolutely. It takes a shift away from this idea that it's all or nothing, to a recognition that real peace that lasts. It needs a solution where everybody wins, where everyone feels heard, where everyone feels respected, and where everyone feels safe. And it's not just about political agreements. It's about building trust. It takes time. It's about understanding the other side, understanding where they're coming from, and fostering a sense of shared humanity.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. We've gone from what seemed like a simple ceasefire agreement to talking about the future of the whole region. It just shows you how important it is to stay informed and to really go beyond just the headlines, and to understand how complex these issues are.
I agree. This analysis from the Washington Institute, it's a great example of how, when you dig deeper, you can see the nuances, the potential consequences of things that might seem, like isolated events at first. It's about connecting the dots, understanding the history, the context, and recognizing how all these different forces, how they come together to shape the world around us.
So, as we wrap up here, here's a final question for you to think about. If you were advising President Trump, what's the one thing he could do that would have the biggest impact on actually getting lasting peace?
That's a tough one, but I think the most impactful thing, the thing that would make the biggest difference, would be to really get behind building a vibrant civil society in both Gaza and the West Bank. And that means investing in things like education, healthcare, economic opportunities, giving people the tools they need to build a better future. It's a long game, it's a long-term strategy, but I think it's the way to go. It's the most sustainable way to peace.
That's a great point. A huge thank you to you, our expert, for taking us through this complicated web of information, and to you, our listener. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've gotten a better understanding of just how complex everything is around this Gaza ceasefire, and how it could affect the region. Keep those questions coming. Keep exploring. Keep searching for those nuanced perspectives, the ones that challenge what we think we know, and help us understand the world a little bit better. Until next time, stay curious.